Hello everyone, this is Chase Pounds. Happy MLK Day. As a tribute to MLK Day, I'm going to be discussing about the MLK and Emmitt Till, both MLK and Emmitt Till, about him addressing him in the speeches. What brought me to this subject was mainly because back in January of 2022, there was, for the first time, me and my parents for the first time watched a documentary on to be made about the story of Emmitt Till, which was called, it aired on ABC station called Women of the Movement, which was a like a mini series type of documentary series. It was very well done, a very nice documentary that tells the life story of kind of the events leading up to the story of Emmitt Till, in the effect it had a change on America, the nation, as it did in the real incident itself. Now, during the one thing which really is the story that tells, if most of you are familiar with it, is of a boy from Chicago, that goes to visit relatives, family members down in Mississippi, in Money, Mississippi is where it's set. And he is unfortunately murdered and killed by two whites. And because of apparent false accusations that he whistled at a white woman to get her attention, which most people always denied this. And it was this rumor that resulted in his death and murder of two whites coming up to his uncle's home and abducted him and brutally beat him and then shot him and tied him to a cotton gin fan. And he was thrown in the Tallahatchie River, where his body was found a couple of days later. And this outraged a lot of people, including, of course, his mother, of course. And most people weren't planning this for his funeral, that his body would not be shown, but his mother insisted on having his body shown for the nation to see the problem that takes place, the nation's ongoing racial problems, particularly in the Deep South. And it did somewhat have effect on and mostly did have effect on society and the nation as a whole. And it was one of the key events that led to the start of the Civil Rights Movement, along with the Brown vs. Board education, Emmitt Till, and the Montgomery boycott, or what I consider the three defining events that led to the start of the Civil Rights Movement. And with that, when we was watching the movie Women of the Movement, my dad made an interesting point, and I always kind of wondered this after he said this. I didn't think much about it before when he said this, but how come MLK didn't address or march or protest over the lynching of Emmitt Till? And I never really found a reasonable answer for it. A fellow person at work I kind of overheard said that the reason why he may not have addressed it was because he was just getting started in his movement of civil rights. But doing research on the internet, looking at different articles, I read that the reason why the reason why he didn't address, I think it was that because Well, actually, he did actually. Well, I was looking up on the on the internet that they did say that he did address him in a couple of speeches, and where months following his murder or lynching. Some people consider lynching because even though this was an era where lynching was kind of somewhat on the decline, but there was still some isolated incidents of lynching into the 20th century. Even though during the 30s, during the Roosevelt administration, there was an effort to try and curb lynching, and lynching did start to decrease with a series of anti-lynching bills. But unfortunately, it still occurred. But MLK said the reason behind the Montgomery bus boycott was because of the incident Emmitt Till. And he thought, and I didn't look at it in this perspective, that the reason for Emmitt Till's lynching or murder was because of it was a way of trying to intimidate blacks in the South from the voting polls, which was a true issue at that time prior to the voting rights bill of blacks being disenfranchised, and voter suppression was rampant throughout the South ever since the Civil War, and ever since post-Civil War days of Reconstruction, emancipation, that vote suppression was a common tactic, and King saw the Montgomery bus boycott as a way of addressing those issues and tackling the problem head on. It was said that in others over the years he did reference Emmitt Till 8 years later in one of his sermons on Mother's Day. They talk about his cries when the boy was cries when the boy was being abducted and murdered. His cries and the injustices as an example of showing the racial injustices in the nation at the time. Though and those were the only few times he referenced Emmitt Till, but also forgot to mention bus Montgomery boycott was that Rosa Parks, the lady who started the bus boycott movement, referenced the reason why she did that was mainly because she was thinking about Emmitt Till and his heinous killing, which as I said, was never prosecuted at the time. Again, because of racial bias, no one was never charged for the crime. He thought this was a way of standing up. She thought this as a way of standing to Jim Crow racism and injustices at the time. And that's what's supposed the reason why behind. I hear why she chose to not give up her seat. As the story is that she gave up her seat. She didn't want to give up her seat to a white person, mostly white person on the bus, and that was one of the events again to start the movement, the civil rights movement, and about 8 years following the death of Emmitt Till's murder, which happened to be on the anniversary of August the 28th, which was the 8th anniversary of the actual day of the murder. Another monumental event in history occurred. Was the March 1963 March on Washington, led by the civil rights activist Martin Luther King. Though King, which this is the event most people are familiar with, where Martin Luther King gave his "I Had a Dream" speech. Most people again are familiar with this. Yet interestingly, he doesn't reference Emmitt Till in his "I Had a Dream" speech. Would it be interestingly? Would it be the anniversary of the actual day of the murder itself? King kind of told in his speech a broader issue of racial injustices about from both oppression, poverty, economic disfranchisement, voter suppression, violence, prejudice of skin color, and so forth, for tackling on the broader issue than the main issue of the racial violence that occurred in the South at the time. The recurrent racial violence that happened at the South at the time. And
did you know that having to get out of bed to pee at night is actually
but that remains a interesting connection with both Emmitt Till and MLK. Though, like I said, he never did. From much I have researched, that there wasn't any instance where King ever went down to Money, Mississippi, where the event took place, to address the actual killing. But he was aware of it, and he did acknowledge it in many of his speeches and sermons. And that's the interesting connection with MLK and Emmitt Till. Though interestingly, with the story of Emmitt Till himself, he and when I was coming up in school, I was rarely ever taught much of the story of Emmitt Till. About much of my elementary and middle school days, I never was aware of Emmitt Till or heard the story of him. It wasn't a figure that I was familiar with, which really, as I mentioned before, I wasn't that into Black history, but frequently, of course, I remember we talked about MLK, especially on MLK Day. We would frequently talk about Martin Luther King, but not the story of Emmitt Till. It wasn't until the time I was in the time I was in high school that
Did you know that having to get out of bed to pee at night is actually a sign that lack of firmness is true?
It wasn't until the time I was in high school that I didn't learn about Emmitt Till. Mainly for the first time was when I was in the history class. My teacher referenced the story. Still, it wasn't a story that I was familiar with. It was until my junior year of high school that there was that during the time of the Ferguson arrest, during the killing of Michael Brown, I watched a documentary for the first time about Emmitt Till and the story. And it was one of the events that it was at the time where I was starting to really find my footing and interest in Black history. Not only that, but other events such as the Tulsa Massacre, Rosewood, East St. Louis, and other events. And Emmitt Till was one that I was starting to learn about. But thinking about it, it wasn't one of the main events that I was traditionally taught in much of my elementary, middle school days. And not much as a curriculum in my high school lessons either, but I learned about it from other sources, from documentaries, including a PBS documentary called The American Experience. Not only that, just recently, in Sunday morning that I watched the document. There was in a segment of Sunday morning special on Sunday morning, the CBS special, that they mentioned that the area where the actual lynching occurred, that Emmitt Till's the location of the event are mostly unknown, such as the store and the barn. Most people are unaware that was the actual place where the events that occurred with Emmitt Till's death. Death death, and it's actually been said that the place where the barn where the lynching took place is just now just a random shed where people keep storage and goods at. No one has any historical significance or is aware of the historical significance of the place that Emmitt Till was murdered at. There's no marker, no grave marker. Most people aren't aware of this. And the store, as I said, isn't preserved. It's actually abandoned and overgrown. There's no marker to mention that this is the place where it all took place. And even worse, there's like even a little plaque that actually does commemorate the events of Emmitt Till, that took place. The Emmitt Till Memory Project, and this is what the plaque looks like now. It's just riddled with bullet holes. You can barely really make out what the marker looks like. Read what's on it. So it still shows you that there isn't much interest in keeping up or kind of keeping up or preserving the history of the events itself. And people actually in the curriculum is not even mentioned. Most people aren't aware of in the state of where it all happened. In the schools of the states where it all occurred. People aren't aware of the events. Many students coming up in high school, and they're trying their best now to put that in the curriculum, and it's kind of reminiscent of it's very reminiscent of the of with Tulsa, that they're Tulsa where most people lived in the area and aren't aware of the events of the Black Wall Street massacre that occurred in their own hometown, surprisingly, and people never really shared it or discussed about it. It was kept hidden for years, and kept hidden over the decades until recent years. There was an attempt to try to research and look into the historical event. That's all I have to say on this subject. Interestingly, about Mr. Emmitt Till. Emmitt Till, and as I said, I saw the made-for-TV movie Emmitt Till, but yet I never saw the actual movie Till. I've been trying to find it. I was actually looking at it yesterday on Tubi. I wasn't able to get to it. So I don't know when I'll be able to really watch that movie. I may do a review on that movie itself. The movie itself, Till, if it's something that stands out to me, I could really talk about it. I'm pretty sure there is, for it being a historical event itself. But that's all I had to say. I remember seeing the previews of it. previews of it. This is the poster, the actual version. So that's all I had to say on this subject itself. Like I said, I wasn't familiar. Always wondered why did MLK ever address Emmitt Till's lynching, or killing, in